Phil Phails at writing a theme song. He doesn't know the words to sing. If success is the flash in the pan, my friend, then failure's most everything. Phil Phails for you. Phil Phails for you. Phil Phails for you. Phil Phails for you. Welcome to Phil Phails. Today we have Bob Peck. You want to wave at the camera, you can, Bob. Bam, making it happen. If I do this right, we'll forget all of this is here. And you and I will have a discussion. Bob, where'd you come from? Like, how did Bob get here? Like, where were you born?
My family is all from Austin. And somewhat ironically, I was born in California.
What part of California?
Don't tell anyone this.
No way.
So my dad was a restaurant guy, and he got a job in Newport Beach, California in the 80s. And so my parents met at UT. My grandparents met at UT. My grandfather, actually, Bob Jr., was playing saxophone in a club on Guadalupe. And that's how he met my grandma. She was in the crowd.
That's cool.
So that was a while ago. And I think the 40s. Anyway, my parents moved out to California in 1986.
They didn't want to give you the Austin
born and raised.
Yeah. There's this, I don't know, folks that watch this that aren't from Austin, they might not understand.
There's crusty natives.
There's like a credibility with when you meet someone out in the world and they're like, they say I was born and raised in Austin with kind of like a
moral righteousness.
There is something with it, and I feel like your parents wanted you to struggle.
I think they were just doing drinking and drugs in California, and here I came.
What part of California?
In Newport Beach.
Okay,
I was born, which is a very ritzy part of LA. It's very funny that I came in there. In like Fashion Island is where my dad worked, and like the stars and all that. Anyway, they moved to San Francisco like a year after that. They were in San Francisco for a year, and then moved back. And I was a little boy in East Texas. My mom's side's from Beaumont, Texas, which is like they're Cajun. They're on the border of Louisiana. My dad moved back to Austin, and then and they got a divorce. They're still best buddies, amicable divorce. And my mom and I moved to Austin when I was 9.
How old were you when they got a divorce?
I was like 2 or 3. So They've always been buddies to me.
That's a parallel between you and I. My parents got divorced when I was very young. Mm-hmm. And there's one thing I just want to ask.
You can still turn out okay, kids. Relatively.
No one's going to turn out okay. Just kidding. Well, one thing I touched upon that came to me when you said you were from Beaumont, my awareness of that area, Beaumont, Vidor, this little part of Texas, isn't it where like the wildcatters came up from, where a lot of this oil was Texaco, a lot of that stuff started in that area,
right?
And it's kind of known, and it's known for being, at least in my awareness, a pretty racist area. Yeah, they had like a sign in Vidor that was like, "Don't let the sun." It's
a KKK kind of vibe in Vidor. Beaumont is a much larger city, to where it's like, it's like half white and half black. So it's very integrated, urban. It's not quite New York, but it's not like there's not casual racism in Beaumont. Okay. Vidor is a tiny little town near there where there's, it's like white trash country people. So
did you feel, when did you move to Austin? You were how old?
I was like 9.
Okay. So you might not have gotten a sense of it. I was born, and half of my time I spent in Mississippi. So I kind of did get a feeling I did get exposed to a lot of like indirect racism and stuff. And I'm wondering, were you exposed to some of that stuff in Beaumont in your memory?
Not really. I mean, I really remember it being pretty harmonious. Mm-hmm. I kind of want to look back and be like, those racists, but That's not really true.
Just
My
for that, you
memory-
want to be edgy.
I want to be edgy about it.
You want to
And
have an edgy
also,
backstory.
Beaumont, yeah, I want a more meaner origin story than I have.
Oh my God.
But no, Beaumont is fine. It's just not a lot to do, and it's kind of ironically in French, because there's Cajun people. It's a French type. It's Louisiana practically. It's Louisiana, Texas, and it means beautiful mountain.
Oh,
in France, in French.
Okay.
It's the flattest city in the world. So it's kind of a good. That sums it up.
That's funny.
That it's
so
just
it's a joke.
It's
name.
a joke of a town.
They're saying
kind of, yeah.
beautiful mountain, and it's the flattest
just,
land.
It's swampland, basically.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Just a bunch of jokesters.
So yeah. So love Beaumont. Go when you're passing through there. Get us a bowl of jambalaya. But otherwise, peace to you guys. Happy in Austin.
And you got there when you were 9.
Well, I remember we had a Y2K party in South Austin. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like that's validates me as an Austinite.
What's that mean?
Like
you rolled over your
like
computer
like,
almost.
Oh, when did you come to Austin? Oh, you're not born here. How long you been? I remember we had a Y2K party in Austin in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I've been here for a little while.
Y2K was when we thought everybody, well, the powers
for the zillennials watching Y2K,
the media at the time that was
Chaos.
there. The sky is falling.
Yeah, they didn't know that the
Y2K
computers were gonna. They didn't think
roll
that it was
over.
gonna roll over to
Right.
2000.
It would
cause
just
all these like economic
with banks
chaos.
And so y'all at a party. What did y'all do at that party?
Like we played Prince 1999, which is the main the main song of Y2K parties.
Yeah.
No, it was this great party at my neighbor's house. I was a child, so whatever. But anyway, yeah, I've been in Austin the whole time. Went to UT Austin, so I just never left. I've been here the whole time. My wife is from Laredo. She moved here in 2007. We met at UT, and we thought about going to different places. Thought about going to LA there for a while, actually, in film background. A lot of our buddies went out there. And we went to LA in about 2014. I had a film play there.
Yeah.
Actually, the one you scored.
Yeah, The Kingdom Within. Let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
I'd like to know, what was it like growing up in Austin, Texas? You said you were here from 9 and all the way to college. Like, what was it like being an adolescent and then being a teenager and then being a young man?
In those days in Austin, there was one skyscraper. I mean, that's what's crazy. And it was the Frost Tower.
Okay.
Which looks like an owl. That was like
that was the one, the owl one?
Just the Owl Frost Tower.
Which everybody thinks is like the
There was
Illuminati,
the stair step
right?
one, actually. The stair step one, which is like Congress and 6th, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was an Illuminati like pre-internet conspiracy
'Cause the
about
owl-
the Frost Bank owl building.
Because it's an owl. But I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, anybody out there that watches this, fact check it. I've heard that the architect for it went to Rice University.
And it's probably true.
And
yeah.
Rice is the horned owls.
Yeah, so that was like a
So he might have
FU
just-
to the Longhorns, I guess, in some way.
Yeah.
Just
So
kind of funny.
That was the only skyscraper. Did you hang
It was
out
that
downtown?
one and the 3-step. No, I just, now there's 19 million. I mean, it's the other joke about Austin is the official bird is the crane.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cranes.
Where were you in Austin growing up? What part of town?
I'm from South Austin, so like Oak Hill area.
Yeah.
Which is a
yeah.
very like idyllic suburban place, and did theater. I did stand-up comedy as a child.
No way.
Yeah. Did you know
You
that?
did. I didn't know that. Tell me about that.
Starting to embrace my history as a child comedian now at 35. I did jokes. I was in theater, and I would do like a set at like talent shows. and
Really?
Stuff. I probably did 4 or 5 different like stand-up like routines throughout my middle school and high school.
This begs me to ask you to give. Do you remember any
Oh,
of the?
sure.
Can you just give us a couple?
It was about little kid stuff.
let me hear it. I think we all.
I had one about like my imaginary girlfriend. I had because I was single at the time.
You can't just give us.
I did one.
Give us a
Okay, I'll do
punchline
you.
here.
Let's
Let's
hear
some punchlines.
I did a joke about Legend of Zelda. which
Yeah, let's
was
hear it.
Nintendo 64 Ocarina of Time. The joke was, you know, when you're in a dungeon and you find a treasure chest and you're super excited because you really need to, you know, upgrade your gear. And it makes that great sound when you open up a chest in Zelda. You open up the chest and it goes, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, stick. And you're like, a stick? That's what I got out of the treasure chest? I need some more. I need more than this.
Yeah. You put this in a treasure chest?
Right.
It'd be like
you can get it off a tree.
Someone's storing like their dirty shoes in like an opulent.
Right.
You really won some jewels out of there.
I'm like the hero of time here. I need better gear than this. There's like hundreds of, you know, enemy warriors coming to fight me, and I pull out my stick, you know, thing. Yeah. So anyway, so that's my.
Were you killing it?
I crushed.
You crushed.
I mean,
what was your audience? Was it kids?
It was children.
It was children.
It was middle school, you know, talent show basically.
And
like my first one was I think 7th grade, and you know, I think the best thing probably that I can like reflect on fondly about that is like it was courageous to do that in some capacity, to get up there and like tell jokes to your friends and stuff. But it was a level of like humility and like vulnerability and all that. And then what happened was I did that in high school too, and I would like MC talent shows and stuff. And then I went to college and I met all these guys that were way funnier than me, to me, that were just like effortlessly funny. And I can hang, but I was just like, I'm not going into comedy. You know, I kind of thought I might do that at that time. And at the same time, I had been reading spiritual books this whole time. And
you felt insecure when you went kind of from a smaller pond to a bigger pond.
Yeah.
You felt insecurity and inadequacy in relation to other comedians.
I just knew like I was really starting to get into spirituality and religion. And so I was like, you know what? I'm veering off. So I went to UT for film, and all my electives were in religion. So one of my advisors, I think year 4, was like, all of your electives are in religion. If you do one more year, you can get a religion degree also. So you can get 2 bachelors. So
you were doing film.
You were doing
hardcore film. Like that was your major.
Film production, yeah.
And then, but you were just had an innate.
I've always read spiritual books. Like my dad was like kind of progressive hippie, basically, growing up. And I was reading. My mom's joke was, there was I put out my book last year, and one of her friends was like, why did your son write a book about like, religion? Like what's that about? And she goes, when all the kids were reading Harry Potter, Bobby was reading Thich Nhat Hanh. Which is true. I mean, I read Living Buddha, Living Christ at like 15 or something like that. Yeah.
What? Okay, so you move to Austin, you get into comedy, you're telling Legend of Zelda jokes. Yeah. So you're obviously into games. You're into like
I was doing video games.
Games. Were you going to church? Like what was the crossover to spiritual curiosity?
Well, the church background kind of starts with my dad. So he was I kind of consider it like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So his act, which I've seen a lot of people now, and kind of coming back to the deconstruction Christianity space, Act 1 tends to be kind of like religious upbringing. Like my dad was an altar boy in Dallas, and then he left in college, left the church somewhat dramatically to the lament of his parents. You know, there's kind of Act 2 is kind of this like punk rock phase of like atheism or agnosticism, and he's very like argumentative in some ways, and that like his way is the right way. God love him, and so I can only imagine how fiery that period was for him. And then my parents got divorced, and then he met this woman that she was a massage therapist. Her name was Marcy. She's passed on, God bless, but she was very spiritual, and she was in Austin, and she was like, did Reiki and essential oils and pendulums and all the stuff like in early 90s, which is pretty ahead of her time. You know, I think now that stuff is a lot more common. But back then it was like very early. In her book, I said she was basically like Madame Blavatsky. You know, it's like that's how early she was in Texas.
For folks that don't know who Madame
Blavatsky was the founder of Theosophy in the 1800s. She was like a Russian mystic who helped, get out a lot of these ideas about like the cohesion between world religions and meditation and spirituality and awakening and kind of all these terms and stuff like that. So she was a big part of the beginning of like what sometimes is called as New Age. But yeah, so Marcy was kind of plugged into all of that. She got my dad into that. And then he started having kind of synchronicities, which is a term from Jung, which is kind of deja vus, or sometimes it's called glitches in the matrix. You know, when you have these experiences that are really profound, that are just irrational, you know, that are defy analytical mind. There's kind of no coming back from that. You know, I've had a few of those, and that's kind of what make you spiritually open-minded. And so he entered his act 3 in the 90s, if you will, of kind of spiritual open-minded guy. And I was a kid, you know, I was growing up, and my mom's side was Easter Christmas Christian, so we only went twice a year. And they were very just kind of, you know, take it or leave it. So I'm really lucky, you know, I'm really grateful that my mom's side was like, you know, open and like not pressuring, and my dad was just like, oh yeah, here's Yogananda. You know, my dad was like, here, you know, check this out. You know, you might like this. And so I was just like, this is insane. And so yeah, I'm 35, so I've been, you know, basically reading comparative religion for about 20 years.
Wow.
And been really into it. And so yeah, so when I got to college, I was like, this is, you know, Indian Buddhism, New Testament scholarship, shamanism. I just soaked it all up, and I really, really enjoyed it. And I was like, this is where I'm going. And I think at that time, it was a very like, I'm not doing comedy, I'm doing serious religious documentary.
So it was a way to have some righteousness or some like,
yeah,
because these guys were smarter and funnier than you, and you're like, well, I can do spirituality better.
Deep. Yeah. I'm going
you
deep,
guys can be all chuckles, but I'm going to be, I got you by the third chakra.
I'm going to make very slow paced PBS style documentaries, which I did not realize very few people would want to watch. But I wanted to, and so it was. I'm really proud of that period, and frankly, I think the films still hold up. People are still watching them somewhat, but I've kind of, I think, like fast forwarding to now. I put my book out last year, and my book has some laughs, you know, and so it's an intro to kind of mystic philosophy and spirituality, but it also has some of the early, you know, the way I'm phrasing it is kind of the integration of like the early days and like my personality and humor alongside of kind of the comparative religious study and scholarship and stuff like that. So it's really, it all adds up. There's this really great, kind of to come back to your earlier questions, like there's this great Schopenhauer quote, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, it doesn't make sense at the time, but when you look back on your life, it all perfectly, you know, brings you to where you are in each moment. Yeah. And I feel like that, you know, at the time you're just like, what? These films aren't working, or, you know, the comedy isn't it. But it's like, oh no, now it's all of it. It's all adds up to where you are at this moment. So
quick question about your dad. And I think it's partially because I'm curious and interested, and I'm partially think like this current zeitgeist or whatever, the current culture would be interested in this type of question too, is like, was your dad experimenting or using any kind of psychedelics as part of his awakening? Was there LSD involved? Was there mushrooms involved? Was there peyote?
He did it in college, but I don't think he did it in the 90s. He was doing meditation. He learned meditation from Marcy, but I don't think he used any spiritual psychedelic methods. He had taken mushrooms and like at his fraternity.
Well, I wonder, I've had this question or had this thought, like, because I
give him mushrooms now.
Yeah. When I was young, I explored or experimented with mushrooms and psychedelics.
Yeah.
And I've wondered if it's necessary to have this like intentionality of spiritual awakening in order for the medicine to take hold and have its impact on you.
Sure.
If the medicine is the medicine and it's changing your brain and it's having its impact, regardless of whether you sit down and say, oh, I'm inviting this plant-based medicine into my body so that I might retire my ego and realize some kind of ego death is kind of a buzzword I hear folks say a lot now.
Yeah.
And, does it matter? Do you think it matters that you set that intentionality? I know none of us are experts, but
Well, Dr. Tim Leary, that was one of his famous phrases, set and setting.
yeah,
Right? So set means intention and setting means environment. And I read about it in my book briefly about how, in America, in the West in particular, at least now it's changing quickly, but the likeliest two environments to try psychedelics was a party or a festival.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally think that those are not so great.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
I've had enjoyable times at both of those, admittedly, but it's much better to have that set intention and an environment that, frankly, don't leave your house. For one, stay in an environment that is safe, that you don't want to change your atmosphere. You want to really hunker down.
Well, the idea, I think, is that you're controlling the variables.
Correct.
You're having as many controlled variables as possible.
Right. There's no the toxicity level. It's just like cannabis or similar in that the toxicity level of psilocybin and LSD is not how you die. You don't die from the chemical. You die from doing something stupid.
Yeah.
When you're changing environments, when you're not grounded, etc. So your backyard, like you said, with the set intention of saying, may I come into a new sense of understanding about myself and the world or something like that. May I connect with higher, higher self, whatever your words you're comfortable with.
Sounds like a meta meditation. This idea of like, may I be healthy but
totally. Yeah. Loving kindness. Yeah.
Loving kindness meditation. Oh yeah. I'll share I've always thought, learning software development, which has been my code word for friends of mine. If I've always thought that learning software development, LSD, was best done in nature. I've always loved doing any kind of
software development.
That was our there was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Right.
Was for the Beatles or which I don't know if it actually was a.
John claimed that it wasn't. But
it was
they were taking it, obviously. Yeah.
Well, and it's supposedly a picture, right? That was just drawn by
a little girl drew. I think. Yeah.
But
McCartney girl or something.
I'm not going to endorse anybody to do anything.
Yeah.
But for me in my practice, it was always really wonderful for me to be out in nature and to be exploring, and normally places where not a lot of folks go.
Correct.
Because I've enjoyed also being a part of that journey, being crying. Like a part of most of my journeys when I'm out will be crying and being with deep sadness.
Love crying. And
then another part of my journey would be like kind of naked walking in nature. Mm-hmm. Some like getting back to some primal, bestial.
Being nude?
Yeah.
In the nude?
Yeah. I just hike in the naked and it's not a joke. I actually do. I've enjoyed that.
That's interesting.
On the LSD. And you really want to be in a place where it's controlled. Where there's not.
You don't want to be a naked random bearded man on LSD. bumping into
like a family of four, just like on Christmas holiday. So I actually don't.
You're like, I'm connecting with Adam.
Don't worry, guys. I'm in touch with the deep universal oneness of all of us right now.
I totally sense the unit of consciousness.
No need to fear. right. This is a normal experience, guys. So back to our
I
our
like
question.
backyard under we're lucky enough to have a big tree in our backyard.
Oh heck yeah!
So if you have a nice tree or a nice spot in a backyard, that's really my number one. Terry McKenna said, close your door. I mean, Terrence said, sit on the couch in your room.
Yeah.
You know, or sit by a fire also.
Oh,
is
yeah.
a good one. He would suggest sitting by a fire at sunset.
Yeah.
And taking that. And that also there's a shamanic element, right? So, you know, let's honor the lineage. These plant medicines come from indigenous tribal, you know, traditions all over the world, I think, which is why they're so special and worth research and contemplation. My old Apache teacher, who was an Apache medicine man, he would describe ceremonies where they would, the Apaches would take peyote, which is a cactus, psychedelic cactus, basically, peyote buttons, and they put it in tea. But they, you know, back to the set and setting thing. They do it in the teepee at the ceremony. There's a specific ritualistic component to it. There's, you know, smoke and feathers and a lot of praying, and it's a very meditative process. And so, yeah, I think it's important to be aware of all that.
Yeah. When I did peyote, it was in Mexico. We hiked out of these mountains. I think it was called Real de Catorce. And we hiked down into the desert from these mountains, and I never thought of that, but like after I ate them, I felt a nausea and I felt a desire to seclude myself from the group. And I think for a big part of my journey or my like experience, I was more isolated from them. And I remember them kind of like wanting me to come out and be a part of the group, but I really felt like
working through some stuff right now.
Yeah. And another set and setting discussion is when I did the ketamine assisted psychotherapy that I did here in town. The setting is I'm on a chair. It's leaned back. It's like a reclining chair. I've got a weighted blanket over my body. I've got blackout shades over my eyes. Yeah. There's music played by the therapist. And as I contemplate that, and as I've thought about the, you know, what's the book, the guy who wrote the book, How to Change Your Mind?
Yeah, Mike
Pollan. And I love that. And then I guess I think about when we said a word earlier, when you turn away from, we were talking about with regard to capitalism and money.
Yeah.
What was the word? You remember?
Renunciant.
When you renunciate the visuals, when you renunciate all of this, when you go inward, I felt like I had very deep inner work happening as I'm renunciating. Yeah. Pretty much, it's like this level of
void. Yeah. If you will. Yeah.
I mean, I still remember the first time the ketamine was kind of like, I would slowly dissolve, my hands would dissolve, and I was at one point just clutching on to some bit of reality, like above a deep void of nothingness, a chasm, and having to at some point release into that, and it was deep fear.
Yeah.
At that time.
Sure.
To do that. And I've never had that experience.
Which is representative of your subconscious in some capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so backtrack a little bit. We've kind of gone down this. So your dad didn't really, he might have done it a little bit at frat houses, but not really part of his spiritual awakening.
Right. Yeah. Which I mean, and I write about this in my book, Original Sin is a Lie, out now. Just kidding.
No, it is actually out now, though.
Now.
It is out now. And y'all should read Original Sin is a Lie. It's probably a great book. I haven't read it, but I should.
I need to get you a copy.
Give me a copy, Bob, and I will tell you that I'm going to read it, and I will strive to do so.
Thank you. This is a commercial for me. No, I touch on one of my great spiritual heroes, who's Ram Dass, and he has a lot of stuff to say. He has a lot of teachings. He passed away 4 years ago last week.
Oh my God.
Which is crazy. Departed the plane, if you will. A huge component of his life story is exactly what we're talking about, which is he initially found psychedelics at Harvard
with Timothy Leary. Yeah.
And his
he got
name
kicked
was
out of
Dr. Richard
Harvard
Alpert.
because he gave Andrew Weil a dose, and he was an undergrad. He could
and-
only give doses to graduate students.
He and Dr. Leary were studying psychedelics in a academic setting, and also they were having some parties.
Mm-hmm.
And he was watching the body, like you said, disappear. And it was a very profound thing. They were defrocked. He said, I think they were the first people to be fired from Harvard in like 100 years. You know, it was in all the
just
papers.
Tim got to stick around.
I don't think so. I think it
Tim
was him
stuck
and
around
Tim.
a little bit longer. I think it was just him. But we don't have
they
to
were
get into it.
shamed publicly,
Yeah.
and they also split ways because Tim kind of leaned into kind of being an LSD counterculture figure, you know, for better or worse. I think culturally we look back more negatively on Leary than we should. I've read him, and he's pretty good. You know, I think he's a really moral person, and I don't believe in everything he said. I think he had some egoism, but
What was his saying? Tune in.
and drop out.
Something drop out. It was like something, tune in.
He
and
was
drop
just, he ratcheted up the fear of America in terms of the institution. He was imprisoned for weed.
Yeah.
You know, so he served jail time. Fun fact, the Beatles song Come Together, which is one of the, you know, it's like their number 2 song on Spotify or something like that, was John Lennon's campaign song for the gubernatorial campaign of Tim Leary in California.
No way.
Absolutely. Look it up. Come Together.
Love it.
Isn't that great? So,
Right now.
over me.
Over
that was
me.
his commercial
Yeah.
to be the governor of California, and then he was arrested for weed. So we got Governor Ronald Reagan instead. History lesson, but back to Ram Dass. So Ram Dass had this real philosophical questioning of the drug usage and the psychedelic usage, basically to say, I always come down. You know, the way he phrased it in later years was, I want to get, I don't want to get high. I want to get free.
Yeah.
There's a way to, when you get high, you come down.
Yeah.
And it has value. Again, I'm not, like you said, I'm not saying anyone should do it. If you do consider it, research it.
Do your homework.
Do your homework. But at the same time, it's not what breaks the veil.
It's not a silver bullet.
It's not a silver bullet. It's useful to give a glimpse of really, you know, I think a good way to describe it is like unitive consciousness. I really haven't had, I've had a couple of visuals. I've talked to guys that have seen Jesus in space. I mean, I've heard all the stories, and I haven't really had that. What I have had is feeling a sense of love.
Oh, yeah.
In the heart, in the body, for every being, like for every, not just every human, but every ant. I mean, having this sense of like absolute compassion, because you get this awareness that like everyone's just doing their best. Everyone's just trying to make their way on the rock. And that's what lasts for me. It's not really much else, but what he did was, Dr. Richard Alpert at the time, Ram Dass was, he toured the world, and he said he's been fired from Harvard, he's kind of been publicly shamed, he's, you know, not sure what this medicine is, and so he toured the world to try to find someone who knew about the states that they were exploring, and so that's Be Here Now talks about, and he, of course, famously found a guru, a teacher named Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba, who did access it, you know, according to Ram Dass and the devotees, who was a Hindu teacher at the foot of the Himalayas. So anyway, I could go into more detail there, but you know, it's his life lesson is a disclaimer, really, to say that, you know, let's not over romanticize them. Let's remove the taboo of psychedelics culturally, because that's old timey, and that should go away. But let's also not over romanticize or think that it's the panacea.
I've heard a story about Ram Dass's guru where he heard about the psychedelics and he said, "Give me the medicine."
So he didn't hear about it.
Oh, he didn't.
Well, he just said, "Give me the medicine."
Oh, and then Ram Dass apparently gave him like a 10 strip or something, like, give me more of it. And
yeah. So this story, I got publishing rights to tell this story in my book. Actually,
yeah.
It's called the Yogi Medicine, and it was within the first week of him being there at the ashram, and when Ram Dass met Neem Karoli Baba, it was this fantastic synchronous moment that is a long story too. You'll have to read Be Here Now or the story I touch on in my book about this. But
Original Sin is a Lie.
Original Sin is a Lie. Where books are sold. Ram Dass was so frazzled in a beautiful way, he stayed. And so I'll just tease their meeting. You guys can, you watching, you individual, can find it elsewhere. But he's there for a few more days, and he brought the acid with him because that's what he was giving it to, like a Sufi in Morocco or a Tibetan Lama, and he gave it to different mystics and saints, and he was pretty dissatisfied actually in his travels because he couldn't really find anybody that, he said he said, can I have some more? It was like he met just people that were just into it. And, but then this guy, Neem Karoli Baba, who seemed to be the real deal based on their first meeting, came up to him, a few days later and said, give me the medicine.
Because he'd heard about him giving this?
No. So there's this idea in kind of the yogic philosophy of like the idea of like a super consciousness, right? And so Yogananda writes about this, I think, better than anyone in his book, Autobiography of a Yogi. There's this idea that if you transcend the body over time, there's this super conscious state that's accessible by all, that is really kind of ruled by the intuition. You might have heard the term like opening your third eye or coming up, your crown chakra, so on. There's this idea that you can get information from, higher realms, the ether, et cetera. And that's the way, essentially Ram Dass explains why, because he didn't tell him. He just said, give me the medicine. And Ram Dass was confused. He said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? His traveling companion said, he probably means the acid, man. And he said, oh, gosh, yeah, okay. And so he gave him one pill of, Ram Dass said it was called White Lightning, which was made especially for him, an expert. So it was a strong batch. I think it was 190 micrograms
probably.
And one pill hits the yogi master's hand, and he says, no more. 2, 3,
more,
4 pills.
Oh my God.
So I think it was close to 1,000. And he downed them, and Ram Dass was terrified and basically said, did I just just make this old man go crazy?
Psychotic, yeah.
And the great thing about the story is he said nothing happened. He sat there and watched him all day, and he said he would occasionally look over at him and like twinkle his eye, to kind of joke with him, but he would just go back to what he was doing, like blessing the people and serving the food and blah, blah. And Ram Dass's later reflections on that story are that when you're in Detroit, you don't need to take a bus to Detroit. When you're operating at this level of consciousness, the
medicine
psychedelics are under that.
Right.
It's over us. It takes us out of it, and we get this higher zoomed out perspective. But if you're operating from somewhere beyond that, then it's like a sugar pill. And there was naysayers on that story. That story's in Be Here Now. There was naysayers when he would tour in America and tell that lecture. People would say, really, man, he wasn't affected at all.
Yeah.
So he actually went back. He went back many times, but in one of his trips back, he did it again, and they were even more, they did another time with it, and nothing happened the second time. So I think it's the real deal, and it really justifies, Maharaji's level of attainment, but also yoga philosophy and kind of spirituality as a whole.
So that's some of the story around how Ram Dass found his guru. How did you find Ram Dass?
The movie Fierce Grace was recommended to me, which is a really excellent movie. It's kind of old now. It's from, I think, early 2000s. And a friend of mine said, "You don't know Ram Dass?" And I said, "I've heard that name, but Fierce Grace." Ram Dass famously had a stroke in his later years, and it was heartbreaking in some ways because he was so articulate. He was just one of the most incredible. His lectures are all on YouTube from the 70s, 80s, 90s. He can talk like anybody. He's funny. He was a Harvard psychologist. He was Freudian. He's just this encyclopedia, and he had a stroke, and he slowed down quite a bit. And his later years, I think some of the beauty of Ram Dass was he kind of went from being almost like this kind of brainiac intellectual in his younger years to becoming Maharaji. In his last couple of years, he's really just kind of sitting there and, radiating love. And the last couple of years, the footage of him is just like, he's just present. So he's a profound spiritual icon. And that was probably 2005 or 6 or something.
That's when you discovered him.
Something like that. Yeah. And so I've seen every lecture he's ever given.
Wow. And there's a documentary about his passing called Walk With Me, I believe. Have you?
Oh, that's Thich Nhat Hanh's, actually.
What's it?
Walk With Me, that's Thich Nhat Hanh's doc, which
well,
is
there's
great
one
too.
about Ram Dass
Yeah,
passing.
Going Home. Yeah, I think it's his. There's a couple new ones. Becoming Nobody is another one. There a few Ram Dass docs have come out the last few years.
So you find Ram Dass, and this is around 2005. You're in... Where are you in your life?
Early college, so yeah, I guess 2007, 8, something like that.
Early college, and then okay. So where are we now? We're exploring Bob. What time is it? How are we doing on time?
12:15.
Perfect. Yeah, we could talk for a little bit longer.
The yogi. I read Yogananda in college too. Autobiography of a Yogi is a really famous book about him who. He was a little boy in India. He was born, I think, 1890 something, 93, and he was just this very religious little boy. He only wanted to be a monk when he was a little kid in India, and he wanted to find his guru. He just had this, and I think both in his reflections and later and commentators and so on, that's because he lived a lot of lives. And had been spiritual in all these different lives.
We're talking about Yogananda.
Paramahansa Yogananda, who was an Indian monk and yoga teacher. And that book really affected me. He was the first yoga, his Swami, to come to America and live here in 1920. And so all American yogis owe a debt of gratitude to Yogananda because it was his mission to bring yoga philosophy, Hindu philosophy to America, and specifically, he established ashrams in Los Angeles and California, and he died in 1950. His book was so famous and is so famous. George Harrison passed it around, and it was actually Steve Jobs. It was the only book on Steve Jobs' iPad when he died. He had like a new iPad 2 or something. He just had one book on there, and I think Steve gave it to everybody that came to his memorial. So it's seeped into the culture by way of the Beatles and Apple. I mean, you might not have heard of that name or you might not have heard of that book, but a lot of people that have done a lot of beautiful stuff have read it and been impacted by him.
The reason I know I'm kind of a punk rock is because I don't how do I even say this? There's this way in which we're validating this beautiful work of art by the important people that cared about it.
Oh, well, that's not necessary to me.
I know. I just and I don't even know why that is. Like Steve Jobs,
it's been read by tens of millions of people.
Its influence is beyond, but I guess that's the way folks understand it. They're like, oh, well, that dude did it, I must do it because we hold these people in such high esteem. That's just how I know. And I don't even know how to speak to it.
Yeah, well, let me talk about what it actually says, which is just it's the story of his life, and he had all of these like miraculous moments. It's honestly not for everyone, because some people have said like, oh, it was too much for them in terms of like, basically metaphysical claims. He meets by location saints. It's like he's a little boy in India. He's going around, and his father needs him to run an errand to go tell this man something, and he goes to the ashram and sees the saint, and then this guy comes, and this guy said that he saw the saint at the riverbank, but the saint was here the whole time, and so there's all these like supernatural occurrences, but the way Yogananda writes about it, I mean, the book itself is really, I mean, I think it's a masterpiece. It's a Shakespearean. The fact that this was his second language is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's incredibly well written. He's a literary master. And
this is your second guru, like, or at least your big one. The first one being Ram Dass, and then the second one being
Yogananda before. I read Yogananda before Ram Dass, but Yogananda actually is the dedication of my book.
I think
I'm kind of a Yogananda devotee, I think
I just got the string, how this makes sense, this idea that I'm like, at Ram Dass, or not Ram Dass, I'm at like, that it matters because George Harrison passed out, or it matters that it was
doesn't.
The last.
I think those are just cool fun facts.
Here's how it does.
Yeah.
Here's how it makes sense to me as mattering, and that's that just like with you going on to, what's his name? The Olympian, oh man, I'm forgetting names. I have neurodivergent, and working memory is not my strong suit. But you go on you go on a big podcast with a huge following, Aubrey Marcus.
Oh yeah.
Apologies, Aubrey, or whoever. And then the idea is that this person has the value. Right. But the true value is the influence that he opens you up to. It's the following. It's the people that love the Beatles. It's the people that hold jobs at high esteem. We're able to penetrate into folks and going like, oh, since this guy liked it, or since this guy was into it, you're really wanting. We're using these big buzzwords to say like, this is why it's important. This is why I should have. It's a key. A key into the influence, into their access, into their.
Right.
Does this make any sense at all?
Totally. And so,
because one person is nothing. One person lives and dies. They're Well,
one person is a fractal of the one, baby. You're creative and like musician and all this, so that makes sense that you're punk rock. When I explain this, I'm usually talking to more secular people.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, just Steve Jobs, Facebook, my day job's at Meta. So if I remember talking about Yogananda, I'm like, yeah, Steve Jobs, right? And they're like, huh? That's cool. George Harrison, the Beatles, you ever heard of them? They're like, oh, okay. So I'm talking to people that have less interest in, typically, than the metaphysical, spiritual, and so on. Also, it's okay if Yogananda is too supernatural for you, or you're not impressed by the impact or whatever. There's other paths, and I think a big core about like what I'm really into the Hindus. I'm really into just Vedic philosophy. I really like Advaita the last 5 or 10 years, but I think that's what's so beautiful about like comparative religion to me is that there's a path for everyone. There's a line actually from the Rig Veda. It's on the back of my book. That's the truth is one. The sages call it by many names. That's from 1800 BCE, guys.
I love that.
So that's from over 3,000 years ago. And, there's all these paths. So, okay, too metaphysical, read some Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh, I love Thich Nhat Hanh.
And the way that huge influence on me.
The way that I've said that, I think I've said a similar thing. It's like I've gone through in my life and kind of like, there's saying you can dig 5 holes that are 1 foot deep, or you can dig one deep. But I've dug a ton of maybe 7 foot deep. Well, and Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, Eckhart Tolle, even Byron Katie.
Yeah, I love Byron Katie.
Michael Singer. It just, the list goes on. And the way I've thought about it is this idea that These folks found the lake of truth. They found the lake of truth and they drank of that water, and they're sharing that truth with all of us.
Yeah.
And I know it because just like the author of the guy that was just on your podcast, the person who published his books, it sounds true. Mm-hmm. But not only it sounds true, it feels true in the way that they talk about the difference between mythos and logos in some of these books, about how, logic for a long time wasn't trusted, because you can give someone money to logically take you any direction. Logic can be spoiled. It can be bought. Mm-hmm. Logic, you can take someone and logically take them anywhere, but myth, a story, a poem, bypasses all of that and hits you in a place that you don't necessarily understand, but you feel it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And I believe these folks, these Ram Dasses, these, they went and drank of the water, and they speak a truth that you just feel it.
There's this guy from Galilee that I like, ancient Judea, and he says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. And I think that's what the yogis say. Mm-hmm. And Buddhism is called Buddha nature. We all have this inherent truth, this inherent unitive. It becomes more and more apparent. For me, I haven't had like this rapid awakening. It's been very gradual.
Yeah.
I think for most of us, it's like that. I think there's, your Byron Katie's and Ramana Maharshi's, and some people just wake up and they're enlightened or something like that. But for me, it's been excavation. But that's what it's shown me, is that every person has value. Every person has this potentiality of infinity. And that's what I think the best of the spiritual traditions say. That's what the real masters say. And I think, it's a good barometer to understand teachers and teachings, because now I'm getting people. I had a gal ask me, she goes, I feel like my BS meter is broken. So I love this. She says, because now she left a very bad religion, admittedly, kind of a cult-like.
Not the band Bad Religion.
Not the band, they rule. She left, Jehovah's Witness. So, J-Dubs, I think it's more of a controlling community that doesn't allow for the infinite potentiality of all people. And so she was shunned, and she's been kind of meandering through different paths and teachings, and she's so really inspiring to me and become a friend. And she said, I feel like my BS meter's broken. How do you determine the validity of a path?
Yeah.
And I think it's to your point. For me, it's a little bit of both. It's the intuitive and the rational. So the intuitive would be, what's the feeling of it? Is this empowering? Is this designed to help me in a sincere way? And I think we all have that compass that can find it. If we're clear, we can know that. Yeah. And you can use a rational mind. You can say, gosh, what's the history of this teacher or institution? Do they, have they had scandal stuff that's worthy of, investigation and contemplation and so on? So I think it requires both in terms of, when you take a dish off the spiritual buffet line, if you will, because I'm I'm an advocate for the spiritual buffet line. That's kind of my joke. I'm the billboard,
for the buffet.
I'm 2 for Tuesdays, on the next exit. That's all I'm doing. I'm saying, go check out all this other stuff. And at the same time, use your own, intuitive capacity and your intuitive heart and your rational mind. Use those both to determine the validity. Yeah. And
just kind of bringing us back to, we had those questions about, in order to succeed, we have a great guest, which I already have a great guest.
Hey,
I think this is a wonderful guest. A catchy title. I think Phil Phails is a wonderful, catchy title. I think we've got that. Having that locked in title or that locked in subject matter, I kind of want to steer us back for this last part of our discussion to, you're doing podcasts. You've done podcasts.
Yeah.
You're doing another one, Breaking the Veil. You did the one before, Beware How, which I love that name.
Thanks.
People didn't get it. I think when I heard that, I was like,
Six
yeah,
of us
dude,
loved it.
I freaking love Ram Dass. I love you. I was like, that's genius. But so, what is the intentionality? What are you wanting to do here? And what brought you to that as the vehicle for sharing? Those are three questions all wrapped up into one.
Thank you. That's really great. And, I'm honestly really excited about it. I'll also mention how, like, our connection, because I put the book out last year, and it's been getting out there. It's not a New York Times bestseller yet. Asterisk.
This podcast is going to do it for.
It doesn't matter if it sells another copy. I don't care. But it seems like it's helping people. I'm getting messages from people saying this is really, useful to me, and that's the motivation. It's basically, I've gotten some really profound messages that's new to me. Nobody really sent me that from the film. I got a couple comments in my filmmaking days, but I'm getting like messages of people going, this is, been really profound to me. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing this now.
Yeah.
It's like, if you help one person in a sincere way, it's like, okay, I'll make 1,000 fucking TikToks.
Yeah.
If 200 got out there and helped a few people. So, this is what I'm doing. And it doesn't quite make sense right now for me to start the next book, just like from a tactical standpoint. I have a couple of ideas. I have a lot of stuff I've written, so I will publish more books. But right now I've gone on a few podcasts this year, and it's really fun. I really enjoy talking to people. I like interviewing too. I like getting to know who the guest is. So we should switch it with you.
We can switch it. Yeah.
It does play into my background a little bit in documentary, in terms of documentary film is all about asking questions to subjects. Mm-hmm. So I'm very comfortable with that. You typically start with 5 or 10, and you also have follow-ups that are organic in the moment, mm-hmm. and that really gets good stuff. And so I know how to do all that. And about a month or two ago, I said, okay, universe, I think it's time to bring the podcast back, kind of capitalize on the momentum right now that I'm starting to snowball. My joke also has been like, nobody's giving him what I had to say for 10, 12 years, and now they're starting to. So let's do that. And then I'm walking around with a buzz, actually, in HEB. I had a couple beers.
Yeah.
And I bump into Phil Jones, producer and audio engineer. And he says, hey, I just finished my producer course at Austin Public, which is the public access studio in East Austin, which is 7 minutes from my house.
All this gear that we have here is all Austin Public. Shout out to Austin, Texas for subsidizing. Oh, keep going.
Shout out Austin, Texas, and Austin taxpayers,
appreciate
which
you.
includes us.
Well.
And anyway, you said, what are you working on? I just finished my producer course. Let's shoot something. And I said, this is crazy, Phil, because I just decided 3 freaking days ago that I want to bring the podcast back. He said, let's shoot it in the studio. And a lot of people, we shot James McRae's interview, and a lot of people are really digging the Between Two Ferns kind of vibe of it.
So good.
It just makes sense. And it was kind of like, he references it, the Paulo Coelho, the alchemist, who says, like, when you make a decision, the universe conspires to make that happen. And it was very clear that happened with this show. So I'm super excited, and I'm ready to see where it leads me into the next chapter.
So what I hear is wanting to touch people, wanting to impact folks, and wanting to make a difference. You're saying, like, I would do 1,000 TikToks if it meant that I was able to impact and change the lives of a couple folks.
Once you get a couple of comments and messages of people saying this is really landing, it's what else is there to do?
Right. You follow that.
Yeah, you follow that. And not in a vanity way, to come back to it. It's like, I don't care. I've had a vitriol. I mean, the book is called Original Sin is a Lie. I've had angry Christians come in my space.
Heck
and what I do is I just send them compassion as best I can. Because
loving kindness meditation.
Yeah, just pray for you, actually, bro. And because it's like, it's a service thing. It helps them and it helps me. It's it's a two-way,
Heck yeah.
Benefit. And, may all beings be free.
Yeah. I've thought about that quote. I was in the room producing that podcast, and I thought I loved it. And I've thought about that quote about, what I'm embarking on.
Yeah.
And this like almost improvisational way of searching for my purpose or my way of impacting the world, impacting this community, impacting society in a way that's positive, that's more in alignment with who I am. Because I don't think I've found it yet.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is there a part of you that's searching for how to make a big impact, how to what's the vehicle for your message? You've done documentaries, now books, you're doing podcasts. Is this all come together into something, or is it I get the idea of a octopus more than like a laser.
Barracuda.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Do you think of there being an octopus? And I'm kind of just full on. I know we've talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. No, there's definitely octopus-like tentacles in the different formats of it. I think I do feel really lucky, I think, to have kind of found like my calling or something. It was a really good, I wish I could quote it exactly, but there's a really good Pablo Picasso quote. He says something like, the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to share it. Some beautiful two-line, mantra like that. And I really feel like I'm close to that.
Yeah.
It's like excavate, dig deep, feel it, find it. And once you do, the sharing of that in a vulnerable but courageous way might have value for other people, and if you enjoy it, great. It might not be your 9 to 5, and it probably won't be. That's something James and I talked about. Is there's this kind of false cultural insistence on, do what you love and all this stuff. It's like, well, that's based on the society and late stage capitalism, which is complicated. You might not find it there, but can you find it anyway?
Yeah. So it might not, and that almost answered this question that I had as I was hearing you talk. It's like, how do we make this something that sustains us?
Yeah,
grows families. Like as we're talking, I hear the door open and close, and my daughter's tiptoeing through the sunroom, and there's this idea or this thought of how can I give to the world? How can I share and contribute in a way that not only sustains me but my family, where I don't have to. And I just full on, I've been listening to a little Noam Chomsky. So how do I not be a wage slave? How do I do something meaningful, follow my passion, my drive, and let that be what nourishes myself and my family? And what I heard you say is maybe you do work a 9 to 5 and you find these passions and they live kind of together in a parallel fashion.
I found I couldn't make a dime off my documentaries, you know. And that was why I learned marketing. I said, oh, okay, I need more skills. And so I did. And I found, a way. I call it my daily bread. Yeah. And it's just where I am right now. It's a part of the human experience on this plane of space-time. I'm putting each little brick on the wall, pretty much every day. Yeah. I'm doing something towards the next thing. So I'm trying to build what you're talking about. And I think the real challenge right now for me, kind of from a consciousness level, is trying to become not too impatient about the flowering of it. Yeah. And really appreciating the sapling. Because
impatience and rushing can really kill the plant. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about going slow. There's something about being intentional. And
I see its oak tree-ness.
Yeah. In its seed form.
In its seed form, in its sapling form. It's poking out the ground. Yeah. So I kind of have to keep reminding myself of that, because I'd rather, I want to have the full-time thing of doing this stuff, but it's not here in this moment. But that doesn't mean, back to mystic philosophy, it's all sand through the fingers anyway, baby. Yeah. So you can't be too you can't cling it too tightly anyway.
Yeah, that's a great kind of transition or segue into wrapping up, because there's a part of being with you that I want to cling to. I want to keep talking to you.
Thanks,
I want to
brother.
keep hearing.
Likewise.
I think I said that at the end of y'all's podcast the other day. I said, being with you and James, I feel both smarter and stupider.
That's a great line.
And I like it. I like.
Thank you. That comes from a sincere compliment. It's a great joke too, but thank you.
I didn't even think of it as being funny.
Yeah.
I think of it as touching upon my deep insecurity and also an awareness of my, immense intelligence.
Absolutely.
And being with folks that tap
and
into
humility.
both of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Here.
And I love you, and I love speaking to you, and I'm really happy to be on this journey with you. And we've touched in very, very, I would say haphazard is not the word, but very we've worked together multiple times now, and it's always been through circumstance or through, it's not been like I put in a job application or you.
Right.
It's always been like, okay, this
Pretty
I'm
cosmic.
in need and I want to do this. Well, I want to do that too, and and I that somehow tells me that I'm on some right path.
Here.
So
the falling of it, the stumbling of it, is our entire creative partnership.
Yeah. And it's perfect that we're here on Phil Phails, because, I'm sure there's been a lot of failures here with you today as we've been talking. I will leave this almost certainly feeling like I failed tremendously and with a deep insecurity, and then with also some pride, and be searching almost like a gold miner for the lessons and what I'll do differently and what I can take with me onto the next podcast. I hope that we can come back and you can teach me about mindfulness. This has
sure.
ironically been like more Phil Phails at podcast hosting.
Yeah.
And I see a ton of, if I was a gold miner, I see a vein here of mindfulness, a vein here of spirituality. How can you teach me spirituality, and how can I kind of take a couple lessons and go and do the second part of the show, which is, right, for me, I'm going to take these questions and I'm going to practice. Like, I'm going to try to do more than 30. I'm going to try to come up with the catchy title, which I think I already have, Phil Phails. PH on Phails. Come on. That's perfect.
It's good.
And then great guest. I'm knocking that out of the park. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to execute on it. And I think I could execute on other things that you could teach me too, like philosophy, like spirituality, things of that nature. So I look forward to continuing this discussion and producing your podcast. I'll just learn by being in the room.
Absolutely.
Of you and great people.
It's a pleasure, my brother.
Oh,
glad
man.
to support and help and learn myself.
Yeah, bro. Okay, well, we'll do this handshake and then electric slide. I love you, dude.
Awesome.
All right,
love you,
man.
Phil.
Well,
Thanks,
that's
guys.
it. Peace, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.